All right, guys, welcome to another episode of Community Leaders. Today we have a very special guest. Some might say the most special guest we could possibly have in this series. 40 years of experience within the creative industry, the CEO of Clock, and the creator of Short Stay Records. We have Denise Stanley today. Round of applause, everyone. Give it a round of applause. Listen, I wasn't in the shot for that, but the reason why Split 60 exists is literally because of Denise. So, like, you just had to get the first round of applause, of course. So, let's get into the questions. So, first question is, can you tell everyone a bit about yourself? Just give a little overview of who you are, what you do.
Yeah, so basically, I am a woman from a working class family who benefited from a completely fully funded education. And so I was able to go to university to do programs of learning where I was funded by the state. Otherwise, I would not have been going. So it's really important to identify the difference that there is now on how people can sign up and study at higher education levels. And so one of the main points of setting up Clock is for people who learn through work, through leisure, through family responsibilities outside of formal education, and to give them exactly the same value for that learning as those people who have gone and were able to take up places in formal education. So I think that's the first thing. I think that social background is really key to what I've been doing. So I have written university programs for the creative industries beginning in about 1985. I set up something called the Cultural Industries Unit at City University, and we ran programs called Making Music Work, Script to Screen, making film and television work, the arts industry. And the main group of people who came to those programs were people from those industries who knew what their job was, but didn't know how it all fit together. So starting with this whole series of 40 short courses on cultural industries, as they were called then, I then set up a record label to train black music managers in 1989. And that record label was called Progression Records. And very similar to the short stay records that we're running now, that enabled black men and women who were interested in becoming artist managers to be able to go through the program of running the label. And then we ended up on ITN News, the James Wells Show, and various other places because the track that was signed was a really good track. And so it was based on literally, this is how running a label works. And then even then in 1989, every individual in that program was able to get 120 CATS credits. So that's equivalent to the first year of a university degree given by Middlesex University, who I have continually partnered with projects that we've been doing because they understand work-based learning. They've worked in work-based learning for 40 years. So that being able to write programs for universities and formal education, being able to run community learning projects like Progression Records, and then working as an industry consultant in the music industry, working with Barclays Media, who do the cultural and creative finance, working with EMI and Virgin, where they combined when EMI bought the Virgin Studio Group, and then working with British Telecom when they went into media, and just generally doing consultancy work. So Clock came about because I could put those three worlds together: community learning, industry, and education certification. So in 2016, I set up Clock. Clock stands for Collaborative Learning Open Curriculum Kit, which is Platform and People. And What that does is it uses a community of practice model rather than a formal education model. So in formal education model, you want to go through a course, pass the exams or the coursework, and you go through that system. And the idea is that you're competing with the other people in your institution to be able to be trained and learn. The community of practice model was very different because you were just interested in joining the workforce. So you're at the edge, the periphery of the workforce when you start, and you move through participation to the center of that workforce. And then you often become a role model and support others. So you then become the equivalent of a peer coach. So CLOC works on that model where people join as new beginners, become regular participants, understand the practice and the community rules and the protocols of the community in any workforce, in any sector. And so that model is very different. But what I was able to do was to then bridge the results of that community of practice model to actually get the same formal certification. So if we take our CLOC sector expert, which is at master's level, the person who does CLOC sector expert is a community of practice program where they are using the national qualifications framework to recognize the skills. And then what they can do is get exactly the same postgraduate certificate from the university as someone who did the course in a traditional way. There is no difference, it's the same certificate. And so what we're trying to do is recognize the 70% of the global majority that learn through work, leisure, family responsibilities, faith groups, and so on, and map their outputs and outcomes to our national qualifications framework to then be able to recognize the skills. And that means that a lot of people who perhaps at school didn't do very well when they were 16 to 18 or 14 to 18, and they've learned everything through work, but they've still got the same number when they write their CV, which is absolutely ridiculous because they've had years of experience as people, as workers, as freelancers, as running their own enterprises, and they've still got a qualification that says level 1, level 2, or level 3, when they're actually operating in the workplace at level 7 and potentially even level 8, which is PhD level. So that's what CLOC is bringing. And that gives you a sense of, it goes from first school certificate level at level 1 with CLOC Explorer to level 8, which is our CLOC Industry Champion, which is PhD level, and every level in between.
Fascinating. Obviously, being a beneficiary of CLOC and the program as well, I couldn't recommend it enough for people out there to be part of and even be part of the CLOC community, because obviously you guys have done some great stuff. And when I was part of the course, it's literally the reason why actually this is possible, from obviously your leadership and the course giving me enough confidence to actually set out on my own endeavor. So I couldn't highly recommend the program enough. What I find interesting is, like, when you tell me about your story, like, sometimes you seem like you're living in the future. And I've spoken to you about AI stuff, like, you know more about AI than anyone else. And you're telling me like loads of crazy stuff like 2-3 years ago. But it's like, what made you embark on this journey? Because you were talking about having a sort of a deal with a program with helping like Black artists, or was it Black management? So what started your creative journey? Like, what made you think this is what I want to do? Where was your mind at when you started it, essentially?
So formal education, music, didn't really give me the skills that I got when I was busking and traveling and playing gigs. So it's a completely different world of practice to actually looking at education. So I think I can't move away from that. But I also think, as a product of London, I grew up in London. London is one of the most diverse communities that you will find. And so the inclusion agenda was really important to me. And I think that has come through all of the projects I've worked with by working in communities. So those communities could be places like Collage Arts, where we set up a program here with funded by the GLA, the Greater London Authority, which was about including people. It was an open access course, and that course enabled people to learn through doing. So providing people with opportunities to do things like produce work, like make a record, develop a track, work as a producer, work setting up stuff on stage. And people don't often get that opportunity of just trying something out. And I think if you think of what enterprise is, entrepreneurships, there are many young people who perhaps haven't got opportunities, so they create them either through hustling or through crime. And that's the same skill set as entrepreneurship. So imagine that you could take everyone who's a young person who is trying to develop their entrepreneurship through activities that they do have access to, could equally be turned, you could turn it over and go, same skill set, but actually do that in fashion. Same skill set, but do that in music. Same skill set, do that in producing products or services that other people want. You can still hustle, but it's in a different field to the one you might have chosen, because that's the one that's available on your street, on your estate, in your neighborhood. So I think there are an awful lot of skills that people have, but they are transferable to other contexts. So talking about AI, as you just mentioned, we have something called the Clock Skills Discovery Workshop. And what the Clock Skills Discovery Workshop is, in a small group for 3 hours, through conversation and examples, you can identify the skills that you have that are sector specific or transferable to other industries or sectors. And what we've done is we use AI to support that process, not by giving you directions to get to a right answer, because Clock doesn't believe in right answers. We are based around experiences and skills. And so therefore, in a way, everything you're doing in enterprise is something that is coming from inside. You're looking at the opportunities outside and you're trying to find ways of meeting them. And what AI does is suggest a series of prompts within that skills workshop to pull out of you examples that you perhaps would just glide over because I'm just doing that. We often hear from people who are brilliant in the creative industries, I've just got to do this. And what they're doing is integrating 3 sets of skills, doing it rapidly, taking 10 seconds to do something and fix something for live sound or management or any of those roles, even in performance, where people are suddenly having to adapt and respond. And that experience, when you're doing the skills discovery workshop, is pulled out in discussion by AI prompting. And then people can go, because of the fluency of the examples they give, and also the fluidity across different ways of engaging in different things that they're doing, whether it's work, whether it's family, what they're juggling different things. And so that helps them pinpoint where the level is, because the whole point of a national qualifications framework is it identifies the outcomes of a particular level. And it runs, if you think of Europe, EQF, European Qualifications Framework, runs from level 1 to level 8. And the outcomes from any formal course have to demonstrate that they're at that level. Clock just uses that as equivalent. The most powerful word in life is equivalent, because you can go, it isn't that, but it's equivalent. And Clock operates in that space.
Fair enough. Agreed. Obviously, in your answer there, you touched upon community there and the importance at the beginning of the answer. Obviously, what you're doing at the moment is you're crafting communities, whether it is in London or wherever Clock may operate. It's quite international as well. So what is the importance of community to you? Why do you think community is so important? You know, the work that you do, why have you essentially dedicated your life to creating communities and giving back to people? What is the impact of community?
So if you think of the first example I gave earlier, which was about community of practice. So communities form for different reasons. Communities of interest, people who are interested in the same things. Communities of practice are people who are working in an industry. Now, we would think about them, let's say we had a conference and we brought people together. That's in one time frame. Communities of practice operate over time. So there may be someone who's done something in the past that's developed a skill set or a tool that you then go forward with. And so communities of practice happen over time and space. So they happen in different countries. They might have the same actions, different terminology. They might have different processes based on how their community have developed over time. And one of the things that I think is really powerful about clock, it goes beyond the nation state. So it's not an English model or the country you're in. It's an international practice where you've got someone from your sector in your country who is your peer mentor and peer reviewer program, and then someone who is in another country who's from the same sector and practice. And they are also operating as an industry peer reviewer. So you have two peer reviewers that enable someone to see that their practice is global. It will transfer to other countries. And that's usually liberating because you might have a policy, a national policy that focuses on in quite a small way or a significant group of people, but you might have another country that operates in a much more broader way. So to use two examples, I look about working in Australia within the music industry and working in the UK with the music industry. They're very different in the way that they're operating because of the scale of Australia and because of the importance of the UK in the music industry. And so the communities that you build internationally mean, for example, every 6 weeks we have this meeting online and we call it the Clock World Council in inverted commas. But it is basically anyone who's a clock sector expert who wants to drop on a call and go, this is what's happening in Finland at the moment. This is what's happening in Melbourne or in Riyadh. We're doing this. So you've got a sense of the global creative industries, but you're not a big corporate. We're an international network and of people that operate with that community frame. So that community frame is one of the most important factors, and that's the CL for collaborative learning. Collaborative learning is how you build a community by learning stuff together, by challenging each other's ideas, by understanding the context that people work in and how they differ.
Fascinating. I never thought of like the idea of different communities being different and serving different purposes. Obviously, at Split 60, we have quite a lot of the creators that follow our page are from 18 to 24, sort of young adults creatives. Mm-hmm. As someone who's lived quite a successful life within the creative industry and has paved the way greatly, do you have any... So my question is, do you have any tips or words of advice for any creatives that are hoping to live or have a career as long-lasting and as successful as yourself?
Yeah. Don't limit yourself. I think the most important thing is understanding that the skills that you have, that you learn in every part of your life, have got some value to add to the career you want to develop. I've had a range of jobs in my life. I've done everything from being a motorcycle dispatch rider, working in a library, running a music project, being on the Greater London Council Arts and Recreation Committee, running a 2,000-seater venue in Lewisham with live events and cinema, and running a university department. So I think every aspect, being a busker, every aspect of what you do has huge value. I think what I would say is get to know yourself right? Get to know yourself in different circumstances, because then you understand what you're bringing. And always ask for feedback, because if you don't reflect on what you do, you don't really know who you are. So every time people say, oh, it's not what you know, it's who you know that gets you on. It's neither. It's who knows what about you. So you're networking. If you don't give information about what you're really passionate about and giving the right information to the right person, then they can't recommend you when someone says, do you know anyone who does this? Right? That's one of the most important things, is don't be too insular, but believe in what you're doing. You talk to other people. I was one of those people that when I first networked, my hand would shake like this. And I remember being at the Arts Council of Great Britain in this big building in Piccadilly, and they gave me a china cup and saucer, which we only use in my family at a funeral. So suddenly I'm in this room, in this big hall with this cup and saucer, and my hand is shaking. And I'm thinking, right, either I just put the saucer and cup down and don't have a drink, or I just walk around with a cup so they can't hear the cup rattle. So networking is not something that comes naturally to everyone. Someone gave me a tip to be more comfortable networking, and they said, when you're in a room and you're networking, just look at the floor and see who's got the most interesting shoes, and then go up to them and go, I love your shoes. And then ask them a question about themselves. What do you do? Like, why are you here? What do you hope to get from it? And that is another skill. Networking is a skill. You have to learn it, just like performance or songwriting or production or live stage tech. So I think do lots of different things. And everything that you've done, whether it's with your family, as I said, with your faith group, any kind of community organisations, at school, in team sports, all of it has huge value. It's all relevant to what you do. And although if you haven't, inverted commas, succeeded at school, meaning formal education isn't your preferred way of learning, don't write yourself off and don't believe the label you've got from that experience. Look at the things you can do, whether that's mend your car or whether that's busk in the street, write a song, produce a beat, whatever it is. Don't stop doing. Doing is the only way you learn. Learning and reflection is by far the best way of developing skills and finding out where you can go in your future. And age is irrelevant. I can learn new things now at this age.
Of course.
Yeah. AI, a good example.
Another quick question before we go into short stay records. What attributes, because obviously you've probably worked with quite a few young creatives and young adults that are aiming to be creators. What attributes do you think are vital for a creative to be successful, especially within this landscape as well? Obviously, you know exactly, Fela Batisha is exactly about what's going on at all times. So in this landscape, what do you think are the main attributes that spotlight certain creatives or creators need to have success within their careers? I don't know.
First one, discipline, self-discipline. Self-discipline means you know what you want to achieve and you're able to do it, commit the time to do what you want. So if I want to make an album, then you use the discipline to write the tracks, get them produced, get everything out. So you've got all of the knowledge and information, contacts, relationships, hard work is what it comes down to. Committing time. It's like people who want to write a book. You start a book by writing. It's writing that's the practice. It's music that's the practice. If you're doing lyrics, it's lyrics at the practice. Get your practice to the highest level that you can manage. Learn from other people from your practice. Talk to them. That's the whole point of community of practice. And go, oh, how do you do this? I do this like swap practice. So if you are not 100% dedicated to what your practice is, you are not going to be good enough to compete. There are people who are like, I was a brilliant singer in my school as a primary school. When you move to a secondary school, I was quite a brilliant singer then. When I got to university and it was all classical music and jazz in 1976, there was no way I could compete in that. So it's like singing isn't going to work for me in that environment. Singing worked for me where I was earning money in gigs all across Europe. So the context is really important. If you're not in the right context, get out into another context. Don't stay there and try and do something that doesn't fit where you are. So be dedicated and disciplined, but move if you're in the wrong place. It's like, if I'm banging my head on a wall, why do I keep doing that?
Yeah.
Move to somewhere which is actually more receptive to what you're doing. And you might not know where that is, so take stuff out and try it elsewhere.
Right. I'm very fascinating, actually. Another quick question that I had before we go to short stay.
Yeah.
Obviously, I'm building Split 60 at the moment. We're basically spotlighting emerging creatives. We're spotlighting creative artists. Basically, I'm trying to grow a community at the moment. And obviously, as someone who is the reason why I've actually created it, what advice would you give for myself / any community builder in building? Obviously, you touched upon it there, but what advice would you give someone or myself on building Split 60 into hopefully like a crop section?
I think two things. One, listening. Two, collecting data. Right? You're listening to people, you're identifying what it is that they're looking for or they've got to offer. And then you're building up databases where you know you've got access to information about who might be interested in specific projects. And that data needs to be up to date, clean, so you're checking for any errors. And also it needs to be something that people want to be part of. So if people don't have a stake in what you're doing, they're not there. If you find out through listening, what is it that they want or need that you're providing? And sometimes we don't know. We don't know what it is we need. But then if someone does it, we go, that's exactly what I need. So I think there's no shortcut to that. It's about listening. It's about building the data so that when you've got something that you think will match with that group that you've got here, then you let them know and you follow up. And part of inclusion is about understanding that we don't all want the same thing. And we don't all want to present ourselves in the same way. So it is also about that fluidity or flexibility that enables people to be included. You think about disability and the people who are trying to get around a place, and then suddenly there's no way they can do it if they're a wheelchair user. It's absolutely ridiculous. When I was in Scandinavia in the 1970s, they had buses that wheelchair users could get on and buggy users get. It took 20 more years for the UK. So it's like be on the cutting edge of actually responding to what people need rather than being the last group to get it together.
That's such good advice, to be honest. Well, obviously, I expected nothing less from Denise herself. Right. About short stay records.
Yeah.
Took us a while on here. So what is the plan of short stay records? Like, what is short stay records?
Right. So if you think of short stay parking, that's where the name came from. So we're not in long stay parking. We're in short stay parking. So we're not on long stay records. We're in short stay records. So what it means is that people will stay in that label for a 3-month fixed term contract and then move out. So the idea is that having looked at having more than 300 people go through the music industry skills boot camp, where the emphasis is on rightly from the GLA point of view, the Great London Authority point of view, is to get people into work, whether freelance work or employed work. And what came out of that process is that people can talk about record labels and they can talk about the music industry, but actually they don't have the skills to run a record label, and they don't actually understand what a record label is and does in a practical way. And so Short Stay Records was an attempt by Plock to come up with a model that was, if you like, deeper and shorter than a music industry program, but enabled people to take on a specific role. So either a label, a publisher, or a manager, and to put that within a Short Stay Records scheme, if you like, where we could take on a number of people and give them the responsibility with mentoring to actually run a label. And that's what we've piloted. And the idea is that we run this in different countries of the world, different cities, and then connect people. So for example, if our next project will be starting in January 26, and we will be running a Short Stay Records in at least 4 countries in 4 cities across the world. And we will be connecting them. So they'll be developing local emerging talent and producing tracks, but then they'll be looking at audiences, and then they'll be looking at the other tracks the other cities are doing and swapping them. A bit like in the 1960s, Rough Trade Records across the UK, they were running indie labels in London and in several cities up north, and basically they just swapped product. So it's the same process, but actually internationally. And it's focusing on specific roles that then could, so you've got 3 people who are then going into industry. But those people on that label are from diverse backgrounds. So they are also pushing an inclusive agenda, and people who've got barriers to work. So that might be people with caring responsibilities, could be people who've got particular health issues, for example. So it's about taking those 3 people through a process that's in depth, where they're actually delivering, and so that when they join a company, they can hit the ground running because they've been doing it for 3 months. So that's the idea of Short Stay Records.
So what has Clock got planned up next? That's the final question. What is next for Clock?
Yeah, I can tell you that because I'm really excited about this. This is one of the most exciting points. So if you are learning to drive a car, you can have the instructor anywhere. Some people can pay for an instructor. Some people can do an intense driving course. Some people can have their parents buy a car and then they learn to drive with their parents sitting by them, or their partner, or whoever. So it does not matter where you learn to drive. What matters is that you can pass a driving test, and then you get that certificate that gives you your license. We are now using that model for a license to practice across the creative, craft and cultural industries and creative digital, so that people who have learned their skills anywhere, on YouTube, in their bedroom, in a class, wherever, can actually register to get the competent practitioner badges from Clock together with a qualification at the same time. And that would mean they'd have to do stuff remotely, and then they come in for a 1-day session with Clock, and they get all their badges on that day, just like a driving test.
Yeah. So what would the badge be equivalent to?
So that's equivalent to someone who is work ready. So you work ready. If you were talking about a level, it would be the equivalent of the end of the first year of a university degree. And for some degrees that are more practical, maybe the second. So that is being launched in the autumn. And I'm very excited about that because that will run across all the territories that we're working in across the world. So we'll have the same process. It is benchmarked by two people, one from your country and one from another country. So it's the equivalent of a license to practice in whatever field you're doing, whether that's music, film, theatre, visual arts, game design, all of the creative and culture industries, and also some of the digital, like building robots that work in different situations. So that to me is one of the most exciting breakthroughs that I'm hoping is going to change the way we think about training, education, work, and workforce development.
Makes a lot of sense. Right, Denise, we don't want to eat up too much of your time. We're very grateful for every second you've given us today. Appreciate you very much, and you actually want to thank you for all that you have done, and even during clock as well. I feel like I literally wouldn't have started Spit 60 if it wasn't for you. Like realistically, I feel like when I was a peer coach, that when we sat down and you spoke to me about, like, what are you trying to do? Like, what, like, I'm still not really good at business, to be honest, but you're like, how are we getting money out of this? How you do this? And like, you actually like fully just create the foundations of what I'm doing now. Obviously, we still have a long way to go, but I just want to catch on camera, I guess, I just want to let you know that I'm very grateful for the impact you've had on my life, and Clock as well has had. And I'm sure you're doing that impact for like loads. You've done this your whole life, hence why you're a community leader. So I really appreciate your time, your existence.
Well, I'll end with everyone has huge potential. Everyone, literally on this planet, and probably if we're any more on any other planet, but definitely on this one, everyone has huge potential. You just need to discover it and uncover it and add the discipline to develop it. So yeah, thank you.
We'll end on that.
Cool.
Love.